Welcome to Between the Now and the Next podcast. I'm your host, Heather Injustice. Today, I have the privilege of talking with the authors of the book, Mid-Faith Crisis, Catherine McNiel and Jason Hague. Catherine McNiel is a Chicago-based chaplain, author, and editor and speaker. She holds a Master of Arts in Human Service Counseling and is finishing a Master of Divinity at North Park Theological Seminary. She was the project editor for the newly released Message Women's Devotional Bible that came out just last month, August of 2025. Jason is the associate pastor of Christ Center Church near Eugene, Oregon, and the co-author of Mid-Faith Crisis. Jason has written extensively on the subject of the Christian faith and autism, special needs families, and his own spiritual journey toward hope for his own non-speaking autistic son. This conversation has been on our calendar for quite a while now, and it's one I've really been looking forward to. This book, A Mid-Faith Crisis, it gave language to the different stages of faith that so many of us experience, but few of us know how to name. So we talk about these 4 stages of faith: inherited faith, confident faith, mid-faith, and conscious faith, and how those stages may or may not have anything to do with the buzzword deconstruction. Whether you're holding on by a thread, shouting your faith from the mountaintops, or trying to make sense of why it feels as though God isn't hearing anything you're talking to him about, you're not alone. So just sit back and relax and enjoy this conversation with Jason and Catherine. Hi, Jason and Catherine. Welcome to Between the Now and the Next podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. It's good to be here.
So glad that you took time out to sit down and have this conversation with me today about your book. I think it's great. I've made my notes. It's all tabbed up.
Love to see that. That's awesome.
Yes. First, I just want to ask each of you, what in your own stories led you to want to write this book?
Well, I'll start because my story started a long time ago. I went through some pretty major trauma at the hands of my childhood church when I was still very young. And I go into some details in the first chapter and also in the 4th chapter. So I won't rehash everything right now, but suffice to say, I never really had an opportunity to imagine church or faith as a safe place. And so I've spent a lot of my adulthood trying to find God in the midst of all that, and realizing that in the process, a lot of people are coming to me with similar stories, or very, very different stories, but a similar journey. And I feel that there's not a lot of resources for people who have some very legitimate and serious questions about their faith, but don't want to just abandon it altogether. They want to find a path forward.
Yeah, that's great. What about for you, Jason?
Yeah, I think for me, my story was so much different than Catherine's. And I had a great church experience growing up, and it wasn't until I reached midlife really that I started hitting stuff that was like, oh, I'm suddenly disoriented and I don't know what to think about this. I don't know what to feel about this. So yeah, I tell my story sort of throughout the book, but it was actually Catherine and I, we've been friends for a while. And I was just telling her about some things that were going on in my life. There was sort of this light that kind of came on that she said, this stuff that you're going through, this actually is common in a way. And not to minimize it, but like there's a pattern here that's so common to so many people. And instantly we're like, we should write a book about this.
Yes.
And I kind of unfolded from there, but it was cool because she had gone through her mid-faith crisis so young that she was actually talking me through some things. We were just texting about it. I was like, man, maybe we could do this for other people. I mean, you did this years ago. I'm kind of on the tail end of my own thing right now. Maybe we should help people.
Yeah, that's great. And I loved it because you guys, like you talked about, like you're at a more recent stage of this than Catherine. And I think to hear both of your stories within that book and to understand it doesn't happen at just a specific time in somebody's life. And so I felt that the writing style of that and being able to express the differences in your stories, but also the similarities, that was very good in the way that the book came together and being able to describe everything. But you talk about the 4 stages of faith being the inherited faith, the confident faith, mid faith, and conscious faith. Can you just briefly describe each of these stages and then just define them a little bit for our listeners and see if they can find their self in one of these stages?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I want to say Jason and I did a lot of research into faith development and the people who have PhDs and entire careers on kind of studying these things,
Yeah.
not just inside the Christian world either, but kind of generally as a part of human development around the world. But we didn't want to write a research book. So we kind of, on our own, kind of synthesized everything into what we call 4 stages. Different researchers will have it a little bit differently, but what we present is 4 stages. The first one is inherited faith. And if you think about, your favorite preschooler, I was taking one of my favorite preschoolers on a walk by the ocean one day, and she was wondering if Jonah's whale might jump out of the water and eat her baby sister. Like we just have this kind of cartoonish understanding of the world based on what we've been taught. There's not a lot of depth to it. There's not a lot of reality to it, but we feel some level of identity with this kind of overarching story that our parents, our aunts and uncles, our community is inviting us into. So that's inherited faith. And at some point in childhood, typically we move into what we're calling confident faith. And that's maybe you are baptized or you go through confirmation or a bar mitzvah or something where you're saying, this is mine actually. And it might not even be that formal. It might be going to summer camp or making a declaration in youth group, but you're saying, all this stuff that I've been taught, I'm taking it on as my own.
Yeah.
This is who I am moving forward. Both inside and outside of this community, I'm confident. This is my faith. And typically I think we feel like that's the end. And a lot of times churches and ministries, that's the full vision. We were taught, train up your child in the way they should go and then they won't depart from it. We were given something and we made it our own, done. But the reality that all anecdotal human experience and all the research shows is that that's not anywhere close to the end. That somewhere along the way, after we think we have everything solid and figured out, we hit a wall or we hit a ditch or we fall apart. And we're not asking for it. We're not looking for a way to be rebellious or cause trouble. We just suddenly, things just seem to be falling apart or melting, or there's all this kind of very visceral language that people use when they get to this. And we call this mid-faith crisis. And it's when suddenly nothing makes sense anymore. You're questioning everything. What we found is that there's typically an impetus that would launch you into this moment of upheaval. It could be suffering in your life. It could be finding out that the leaders or the churches that you thought were loving and nurturing are toxic and dangerous.
Yeah.
It could be finding out that some of your core beliefs are just not true or not biblical or not a part of Jesus' story.
Yeah.
There's so many things. But then once that crack is made, the whole thing just starts to fall apart.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to really hit home is that this is a normal and actually healthy stage of faith, because there are so many things that we need to reevaluate and question, so many areas of brokenness or evil that we need to confront. But it's not the end. Again, the testimony of so many people and the findings of so many researchers is that if you can make it through this dark and challenging developmental stage, there is a faith on the other side that is so much more comfortable and comforting. It is comfortable with mystery. It is able to hold some of these tensions together. It is more peaceful and life-giving and integrated.
Yeah.
And that's what we're wanting to say, is that if you have reached that point where it's all falling apart, you don't need to just sit down and shut up, but you also need to just walk away. Yes, we have been stunted by religious leaders who were themselves stunted.
Yeah.
But there's something beyond them, and we have seen it, and we want to go there together.
That's great. I relate so much because you were talking about sometimes the mid-faith crisis, people find themselves in that place. It could have to do with suffering that we didn't want, but here it came. And I experienced that. I went through an emotionally abusive relationship and it ended, thank the Lord. in summer of 2021. The suffering and the pain that I felt, and how many things that relationship actually unlocked for me on a deeper level of what I needed to heal for myself and the trauma that I had experienced. But it was crazy because I was like, God, why did I suffer like this? And I was raised in a Christian home my whole life. I knew about Jesus from birth, and my grandma is great. Hi, Grandma. I know you're watching, but she has been a prayer warrior in my life, and she's always somebody that I could count on. And I'm telling you that what I went through after that, I had so many questions, and I looked after other things. I was like, well, I don't know, maybe my chakras need balanced or I started looking at worldly things to see if there was something that could help me heal because I felt almost betrayed by God.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're good and this doesn't feel good. And that was so difficult for me. Just hearing you lay that out, how I have had my mid-faith crisis. And now that I'm on the other side of that and I'm experiencing the fullness of God and his goodness, I'm like, why did I think all these other things would fulfill me the way the Lord does? It comes on in a way that maybe we're not expecting or that we're not planning for. But when it does, it's really, in my opinion, an opportunity to know God more.
Yeah.
I feel like I've heard a lot the word deconstruction or deconstructing. And I'm just curious if that meaning falls anywhere in any of these stages, or is it something completely different?
Yeah, it's a great question. This has been an interesting conversation all the way through as we've been writing this book because it's such a buzzword, right?
Yeah.
So many people are talking about it from so many different angles. And depending on what circle you're in, it's going to mean something totally different. So
Sure.
sometimes in more conservative circles, deconstruction means, oh, that person is trying to get rid of their faith. Which is unfortunate because I think a lot of people would say I'm deconstructing. That's not actually what they're trying to do. They're trying to figure out what's real and what's not.
Right.
And a lot of things in their tradition, in their particular church, in their Sunday school sometimes are like, I thought this was true. Now it's not true. Now I have to figure out what's true. And the last thing they need is for someone to come in and say, don't ask questions. It's like, what do you want me to do then? So
Right.
I think a lot of mid-faith crisis is synonymous with deconstruction in that way of the honest asking of questions. I think the interesting thing that we kept coming across was this didn't quite fit the trope that many people have of the deconstructing person. Because so many times it's like, oh, it's a person in their young 20s and they just want to go off and be sexually free or whatever. And it's like, okay, like people have done that sort of thing in any religious community since the dawn of time. Like we know sometimes people look and go, I don't want to be a part of this and look for a way out. What we're experiencing here is something of people of all ages. I mean, we're talking about our own family members who are not in their early 20s, who are at a completely different stage of life, and everything's suddenly fallen apart. And so then you have a question like, what am I supposed to do then when that happens? Am I supposed to push the questions away? Is that the good Christian thing to do, to push those things away? No, that person is probably in stage 3 in a really hard place. And so the question becomes, I either address this or I don't. And for many people, addressing it looks like deconstruction. It looks like asking these kinds of questions to figure their way out. So I don't think it's a particularly helpful term right now, just because so many people see it differently. But I like to think of it in terms of mid-faith crisis because we're facing questions and we're facing issues we don't actually want to face. I was a big fan of Ravi Zacharias, and I was a huge fan. He had a huge impact on me. People talk about that right now with Michael Tate and some of these other scandals that are coming out.
Yeah.
You don't want to be disillusioned. Nobody wants to be asking those kinds of questions. But what do you do when the questions come for you? And that's what we're trying to address here. What do you do?
Yeah.
It's not something you're going and looking for. So yeah, I think this is really similar, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Like you said, it's a buzzword. It gets thrown around a lot. And in different faith circles, it can look different and mean something different. And so to have some clarity behind that, I think is very helpful. Catherine, I love how you talk about your healing really taking place after you began to share your story with trusted community. Because like you said, even that can feel really risky to somebody who has been abused or abandoned. This is what you wrote. But when you spoke the truth that was buried at the center of your soul, the fear and pain began to lose its grip bit by bit. that reminded me of the scripture in Revelation 12:11, where it talks about how we overcome the enemy by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony.
Wow.
Again, I relate to that because of my own story. And I felt that same freeing feeling because it's courageous, right? To share your story and to tell your story and to bring light to that as a way of you're hoping it's going to help somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think that we don't do that often enough because sometimes we have so much shame, at least I did, built up underneath of that. And so when you started sharing your story and trying to help other people based on your own experience and what you went through, can you tell us, like, how did that look for you and what did that feel like for you?
Well, I want to clarify again, this healing work has been the task of decades. This has been the fight of my life. So I don't want it to at all come across like in this month I was hurt and in this month I struggled and then in the next month I shared with a friend and now I'm fine.
Right.
The initial events began when I was about 12 and carried on for several years after. And then it was not until college that I talked about it at all. So it took a long time for me, to be honest, because we write about this in the book. If it is a human that you trusted that hurt you, what you need to heal is a successful and healthy, trusted friend. But how do you get that? Because the part of you that can trust is broken, Suffering is just so often a self-perpetuating cycle where you're particularly broken in a way that cuts you off from what you need most to heal. So I would say it took a very long time of me running in the opposite direction and then slowly trying to dip a toe in and testing and seeing, but wanting to find life and wanting to find flourishing for myself.
Yeah.
Being very choosy and being very careful. But without a doubt that it was people who broke me and it has been people who have helped me and healed me. You asked how it feels. I think that opening up to someone when you're terrified to do so doesn't feel good. It actually doesn't. You don't wake up the next morning being like, oh, I'm glad I did that. You wake up the next morning and you're like, I'm going to die.
Yeah. Right.
But it still is that path of life, and so little by little, again, over years and decades, the healing does take place, and I don't feel that way anymore.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that for you. I think about moving through trauma and healing from trauma and talking about how that is not linear. You didn't go, oh, I was hurt this one day and then I talked about it and now I'm great. It's not a 3-month thing. You're going to go through a lot of ups and downs when trying to heal. And looking at those 4 stages of faith, I look at that the same kind of way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you agree or disagree, or what is your opinion when you think about the different stages of faith? Those also aren't linear. You may experience multiple mid-faith crises, right?
For sure. I think there is a linear degree to them. We're never going to go back to thinking that God and Santa Claus are the same person,
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
But we are going to continue to unpack the fact that we think that God exists primarily to give us what we want, which is kind of like thinking that God is Santa Claus. So I think that there is a way where we are just maturing as a person in a forward direction, but we are going to double back a lot of times and realize that there are still beliefs or memories or experiences that are holding us back, that we need to reevaluate, that we need to deconstruct in order to build up something better and longer lasting.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that too. I think a lot of times these things are triggered, like we say, by certain events. I know for me, I certainly went through really huge challenges of my faith. When I went through one thing with my family, went through a lot of stuff with my son, and I thought, okay, I got this, man, I got this. And then suddenly something else comes up you thought you were prepared for, and you weren't. So suddenly you're sort of thrust back into the crisis mode. And that's the tricky part of this. These are long seasons sometimes, and we go through a lot of them the older we get, which is one reason why, we even use the metaphor of midlife crisis, obviously, in the title even, because the older we get, the more hardship we just bump into. And sometimes we're taken right back to a place we thought we had learned. I thought I learned that thing and I didn't quite learn that. There's more here.
Yeah.
So I do think there is some sort of oscillating back between the second and the third stage sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, at the same time, I think we grow muscles. Like,
Absolutely,
I'm not going to be able to run a marathon right now, but if I trained, I still wouldn't be able to do it, but some other person would be able to.
Your brother.
And my brother.
There you go.
So I think that we will still have injury and harm and pain, but we will have something deeper, more deeply rooted, stronger that will help us
Yeah.
to weather those crises better once we get
Absolutely.
past the initial wall or ditch and start to gain the
Yeah.
conscious faith on the other side.
Yeah. Like you said, the kind of muscle memory, right? And I think about when I go through things now, I'm like, oh, well, God's always been faithful and he brought me through ABC. Why don't I think he's going to bring me through XYZ?
Yeah.
You know, when I remember what God did, then I'm better at using those muscles. What got me to a place of where I could trust and believe that he's going to bring me through that, and how can I get to that place again? So Jason, you just talked a little bit about it, but you share about your son Jack and how his development at age 2 began to slow down and that he was nonverbal at that time, and you prayed and prayed and asked God to change that. But can you tell us what happened and just how you reacted to having these talks with God and not necessarily getting the answers you wanted?
I've had a long road with my son. I wrote my first book about our relationship and about my struggle with hope. And that's been the biggest struggle of my life. I've got this beautiful boy who I adore. And he is enough for me, but I also want more. I want more relationship. I want to know him at a deeper level. And we can do that without words. And then I actually had come to a place a couple years ago. You know what? I'm okay. If we don't have words, I'm going to be okay. I have him. But then something utterly unexpected happened. We spent all these years just asking God, let us know him. I just want to know his thoughts. And a couple of years ago, he started this whole new journey of learning to control his motor movements, his muscle movements, to be able to point to big letters and spell out his thoughts. And it took months and months to get to a place where he could tell us what was inside him. But we discovered he is fully intelligent. In fact, he is extremely intelligent. He's 19 now. He's been in there all these years, absorbing everything, all the radio, all the TV, all the conversations. He has been processing and thinking about and remembering. It's an extraordinary memory. And so he was finally able then to start telling us what was inside him. It was Christmas a year and a half ago, Christmas of 23. He wrote us a letter, me and my wife, a letter about how much he loves us and how hard it's been and how filled with hope he is now to be able to spell. So he's on a journey now. He's finishing high school online. It's slow because it's all just pointing at letters, but he wants to go to college. He started a blog. He just posted one this week that was just incredible. So his future is wide open. And my lesson in this was, I was praying for one thing for so long, and I kept just sort of putting hope back and sort of pushing it away. And then suddenly God did something that was very, very surprising. And it's taught me to stay open, to stay curious, to stay open-handed. And I can get very much like, we need to come to terms with the hard things in our life because they're the real things. I can almost go too far in that sort of pessimistic thing and just always expecting it's going to be suffering. Okay, but we'll find beauty in the midst of the suffering.
Yeah.
And there's goodness to that, but there's also going to be great, and there's going to be beautiful things as well. And so this has been the greatest delight of my life, is to be able to meet my son really after all these years.
Wow. What a beautiful story. I read that epilogue and I was crying like, wow, God, how you surprise us. And all through the book, you were talking about nonverbal, nonverbal, nonverbal. And then you get to the epilogue and you talk about non-speaking. And I just love how God changed the story.
Yeah.
And your prayer was to have my son not be nonverbal. Help him
We
speak.
wanted words, yes.
Right. And God gave you words, but just not verbally. So your unanswered prayer was still answered in God's way, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes we forget that God is not a vending machine where we let me put my prayer in the little coin slot here, and then you're going to spit out the thing that I want. You're going to spit out the thing that I'm looking for, that I'm praying for. I'm sorry it wasn't answered in the way you were praying, but he did answer it in the way that now you really do get to know your son on a deep level. That is special.
It is.
That is so special. I want to get the name of his blog so I can put it in the show notes. I would love for people to be able to read that.
Yeah, it's on Facebook. It's called My Words at Last. That was his chosen title.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure I put a link in the show notes so everybody can check that out. Catherine, as we're talking about prayer and all of that now, so you talk in the book about having a traumatic brain injury and how that actually still remains unhealed fully.
Yeah.
Tell me about that time when you were praying for healing and people were coming and putting their hands on your head and praying for healing, but it wasn't answered in that way. But what did all of that do for you?
Yeah, that was a that was a complicated time for me in a number of respects. Ironically, I can't remember it very well because my brain was swollen.
Yeah.
I was just in such desperate need. I needed physical health and healing, but I also needed encouragement and support, and I found all of those things to be in really short supply. People tend to be really excited to hear about your traumatic injury in the first couple of days, but less interested in following up after it's been 2 months, 6 months, a year. So I think a lot of times truly suffering people get left behind. One of the reasons I wrote about this is that the people who did show up for me tended to really want to see kind of a return on their investment. They really wanted to see the wisdom that God was teaching me during this time, or they wanted to pray for me and then get a report about how I had experienced supernatural healing. And I do hope and pray that God healed and heals me and teaches me some wisdom during that time. But what I really needed was for people to be present and to have the ability to sit in the ashes with me and just sit there. And not need a report or an ROI, but just to sit there. And so I think it taught me a little bit about how action oriented we want our prayer to be. It's a to-do list a lot of times, like, God, here are your tasks for today.
Yes.
But who am I to tell God what to do? He's not my employee or my servant. So I started really wrestling with, like, what if prayer is just me coming and, like, laying down at God's feet and being like, well, it's another day. I'm going to need you.
Yeah. Having people sit with you, I think is so important and it's so overlooked, especially when it's a medical condition. A lot of times when it's chronic illness or anything like that, it can be really difficult. And I feel like that when people lose somebody and everybody's there for you all at the beginning and you're overwhelmed with a bunch of food and phone calls, and then time goes on and you're still hurting from the loss of this person and everybody else seems to have moved on.
Yeah.
So having that community that can just sit. I had a conversation with my friend just today. I'm dealing with some of my own chronic illness right now and trying to get answers about things. And I was talking to her and she's like, "Girl, my house is always open. If you want to bring your book over, we'll sit on the couch and you read your book, I'll read my book. I can just sit with you in company. You're welcome over here anytime." And she said, "I can imagine, especially you're alone. I'm sure that's really sad and lonely sometimes because you don't have anybody just with you that you can be with." So I loved that story about how even though God didn't answer your prayers, just what you learned in that time and how you developed this relationship with the Lord and you were able to be like, "I can't, Lord, I can't today, but you can come alongside me."
Yeah.
In the book, it says that Jesus said that his followers would be known by their love in John 13:35. And I thought this was interesting. I'd never thought about this, but it said during his time on earth, he tended to avoid the know-it-alls. And so you talk about how Christians, it's been a really long time since we've been known for our love.
Yeah.
And that feels icky. If both of you could share about how our love is more important than our rightness about things, I would love to hear more about that.
It just seems such the core piece of Jesus' identity when he was on earth. So much of what's on social media and that the things that come to the top are really ugly things and right now, that's where we're at, as a lot of the ugly things and the loudest people have come to the surface. So it's not entirely unfair where we're at, because you have people who claim to follow Jesus and claim to be disciples of Jesus that act absolutely nothing like him. And so somehow we started to value this thing of winning arguments over just loving people. And it's a tragic thing, and it's quite a simple thing. We need to be less full of ourselves. It's almost like sometimes I think we need the social validation of being really, really smart, or we're the ones that have the answers. And I think we need to step back and go, hey, there's a lot of things we don't have the answers on. There's a lot of things we don't have the answers on. So maybe we should stop valuing that as the ultimate thing. Stop valuing being right and winning arguments, and just love people, and not worry about what other people think, not worry about the whispers that they'll have of, oh, look at that. Does that mean he agrees with them on all these? You know what? Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Just love the person. I mean, Jesus was facing that in his ministry all the time. He's hanging out with these people that were looked on as pariahs, and he did not seem to care. And so I think we just need to take on what he did, and just be with people and love people, and not have such an agenda with them, but just to love them.
Yeah. Well, I just was going to add that I think if we actually look at what Jesus said and did, he did teach us a lot, but he kind of taught about what it looks like to love vulnerable people and to resist evil. It didn't teach us like doctrinal points. And the crowds of people who came for healing or for care, for food, he didn't check to make sure that they were a part of the right denomination or believing at all. They believed because they were asking for food. They believed because they were asking for help. And Jesus was literally killed because he kept saying, I'm going to keep doing this even if the people in power are feeling some kind of way about it. And then said, like we wrote, that his followers, Jesus' true followers, would be known by their love. And Paul even wrote that if I have all knowledge, but I don't have love, I have nothing.
Yeah.
And all of the verses in the Bible that we might ask ourselves to take literally, those don't seem to be high on the list. I feel really strongly about this. I actually wrote a whole other book where the subtitle is Risking Love for Our Neighbors, Strangers, and Enemies. And if I wholeheartedly believe the Bible, Jesus and Paul are right when they say if we aren't known for our love, then there's no point. We've got nothing.
Yeah. I feel like the struggle is when people are like, when I love somebody, I'm trying to tell them the truth about what the Bible says. And so I feel like it's difficult for people to say, I'm loving this person, but how do I do that without accepting, or do I just need to love everybody?
If we take it out of this kind of like special situation of right and wrong and God's judgment, we know how this works. None of my relationships are going to go well if I'm constantly like, you need to do this and you should be like that and you need to change in this way. But also, none of my relationships are going to go well if I can't occasionally be like, hey, when you did that, that was painful for me. We need to discuss this and have a change. But also be able to receive these things. We do know how to relate to our fellow humans. For some reason, when we put it into this kind of God conversation box, we lose those skills and we forget we might need to confront our friend about something, but probably not confront a stranger, you know? And if we're going to confront our friend about something, we also need to be willing to be confronted and absolutely have like, yes, you keep helping me be stronger and better, and I'm going to help you be stronger and better. And sometimes we're going to need to invite other people in to show us our blind spots. That's how we live and that's how we grow. It's so different from saying, I'm holding this bar and I'm going to measure you and see if you're hitting it. Because if you're not, then there's going to be consequences. That's not relationships. That's not love.
No, I agree.
But neither is saying, yeah, do whatever. That's also not relationships. But I think we know how that works.
Yeah.
We just, for some reason, can't apply it to the God space.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting how you said that. You put something in the God box and people suddenly think, oh, the rules are all different here. I just don't remember seeing Jesus coming into the public sphere and loving people, but then giving everyone a disclaimer. Okay, just everyone understand. Everyone understand. I know. Yes, I know I'm dining with tax collectors and prostitutes. And I just want you to know, we just laughed for, 10 minutes and I just spoke these things, but brother, you are a thief. You don't see that. People generally know, and they were being drawn to him. Man, I think if we loved like he did, it just changes things. It changes things. And if that was the priority, rather than I just want everyone to know, which seems to be this really weird school marm kind of thing that Christians think we're supposed to carry. If we just ditched that for a while, I think things would be so different.
Yeah.
And Jesus did actually do a lot of confronting, but he was confronting the people with power and religious authority who were lording it over the people who were actually in need and vulnerable. And we have got that flipped. We're constantly like kind of kowtowing to people with power and scolding people who are hurting.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it creates a mid-faith crisis.
It certainly does for very many people.
Yeah, for sure. Jason, you said this earlier. We need to be not so inward focused about being right. That's pride. Let go of the pride. And then also, Catherine, you were saying how relationships don't happen by, like, let me tell you all the things you're doing wrong, and then you're going to be best friends with this person, right?
Yeah.
And that's not how God invited us into relationship with him.
Yeah, exactly.
God did not say, here's a checklist of everything you need to do. And if you don't do it right, we can't be friends.
Nope.
You're out. You can't have relationship with me. I think that's an important thing to remember too. God is not a God that's demanding us to have relationship with him. He's inviting us to have a relationship. He wants us to have a relationship, but that would not be the way to get someone in relationship with you.
Right. It's God's kindness that leads us to repentance.
I was right about to say that. You beat me to it.
Exactly. So you speak very honestly about the masks that we wear in Christian communities and what's at stake when we drop those masks. But what is at stake, whether for someone else or ourselves, if we don't? What if we don't drop those masks? What's at risk then?
That feels like a question for me. I have a lot, again, decades of experience with that question. I think what's at risk is that we aren't known and we don't have the opportunity to be known. We aren't loved and we don't have the opportunity to be loved. Life is a high stakes game and it is 100% terminal, but we can find beauty and goodness along the way. I was thinking about this when Jason and you were talking about the epilogue. We wrestled so much with how to end this book because so much of the breaking of our faith is because we were promised happy endings and we don't seem to be getting them. And so we definitely didn't want to say, like, just push a little further and you'll get that happy ending. That's the opposite of what we're trying to do. But the other choice can't just be like wallow in suffering until death. Both Jason and I are so committed to telling a story in which pain and beauty are coexisting. And so I think that's what we have to embrace in letting our masks slip, is that we are going to get hurt and we are going to have moments of beauty and friendship and relationship. And if we keep those masks up, we might not get hurt, but we're not going to get any of the beauty either of being known and being seen.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. So I like to ask my guests this question. If you could go back and talk to your younger self, where would you be? What would you say? Who would be around? Set the scene for us.
Wow. Younger self. I think I would go back and nobody would be around. It would be just teenage me in my room eating gummy worms. I had a lot of gummy worms in this stage of my life. And just say, you're going to make it. There is life. There is flourishing. There is joy and beauty on the other side of this. Just keep going.
Yeah, I love that. What about for you, Jason?
I think I'd go back to the high school version of Jason in a Christian school. So many people say, oh, you're going to be a leader and you're going to change the world. And I think I would tell him, you don't have to change the world. Just be faithful. You don't have to change the world. It's not on you. You're not the hero of the story. So take that pressure off and just be faithful and love people.
I love that. Jason, when you were saying, people were saying you're going to be a leader and change the world, it reminded me in the book how you and your family went on TV and the host spoke to you and you said something so profound. And in that moment, you were thinking this was just the right thing to say.
Yeah.
This was what I'm supposed to do. This is what I'm supposed to say. And the host was like, wow, so profound.
I did think I was pretty profound also.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, a lot of pressure on your young
there's
self.
a lot of pressure.
There.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to read an excerpt from the book, if that's okay.
That would be great.
Yeah, please.
It's from page 153. And it says, in other words, your emotional or spiritual low points may not signify God's absence or your failure at all. They may be part of the ups and downs of life, signs that your spirit is preparing for a time of growth and fulfillment as the dormancy of winter readies the ground for spring. Not only is desolation and the faith crisis that goes with it not a sure sign of the death of your faith, but it may lead you slowly but surely toward consolation. I
Yeah.
just love that. It's so important for people to remember that you're not failing.
hmm
It's not the fact that you don't have enough faith. It's not that you're not praying hard enough or long enough, or it doesn't mean that you're failing at life. If there's ups and downs and you feel like things aren't going the way you think they should go,
Yeah. Yeah.
reading that really encouraged me for such a time as this, is what
Yeah.
I'm going through and what I'm dealing
Yeah.
with in my own life. So that meant a lot to me. And I just wanted to make sure that others got to hear that too.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you for joining me and taking this time to talk. This book, I'm so glad that you guys teamed up to write this, because I think it's putting words to these things that are happening that we didn't really know how to put words to.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope we can change the conversation a little bit for the many, many, many people who are out there facing a faith crisis that they didn't ask for or expect, and just can't find a path forward. That's what we're hoping to say is, come over here. You're not alone. There is a way out.
Yes. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to be on. And any other books that come out, I'll be reading them.
Thank you, Heather.
What a wealth of knowledge and information to take with us today, right? If this conversation stirred something in you, know that you're not broken. You're likely right on time. Faith isn't linear. It's not about being perfect. It's about presence, community, and the kind of love that holds steady even when everything else falls apart. So if you're navigating your own mid-faith crisis, I really hope that this episode reminds you that there is a path forward and the goodness of God is still running after you. In the show notes, you can find ways to connect with Catherine and Jason. You'll find the link to purchase their book, Mid-Faith Crisis, and you'll also find that bonus link to Jason's son, Jack's blog. So if today's episode helped you in any way, will you share it with a friend? Leave a review, and be sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss what's coming next. All of these actions really help podcasts like mine get out into the world and reach more listeners. Thank you for listening and being a huge part of this podcast. Until next time, keep living between the now and the next.